The checkpoint on Deck 9 of Meridian Station had seen 10,000 inspections. It had never seen anything quite like this. Senior Inspector Vor, a Kalindri with 6 limbs, iridescent gray plating along his spine, and 17 years of border security experience, stood behind the scanning console and looked at the readout with the particular expression of someone who had found something that didn't fit any of his existing categories. He looked at the readout again. He looked at the 2 humans standing on the other side of the gate. He looked at the readout one more time, in the faint hope that it had changed. It had not. "There is a problem," Vor said. The taller of the 2 humans, a man with close-cropped dark hair and the relaxed posture of someone who had spent a significant portion of his life in places considerably more stressful than customs checkpoints, tilted his head slightly. "What kind of problem?" "Your weapons registry," Vor said. He turned the console screen so they could see it. "It shows nothing." Evan Calloway, weapons declared, 0. Zara Okafor, weapons declared, 0. "Right," Evan said. "You are traveling to a contested trade corridor," Vor said slowly, as if he were explaining this to someone who might not be aware of basic geography. Deck 9 processes transit passengers bound for the Outer Rim sectors. The Outer Rim sectors have an active threat classification of Level 3. "We know," said the other human. This was Zara. She was shorter than Evan by almost a head, which still made her taller than most of the other passengers in the checkpoint line. She had the kind of physical stillness that Vor's training categorized as controlled rather than calm. The difference being that calm was passive, and controlled meant something was being actively held in check. Her dark eyes moved across the checkpoint with an ease that felt professional. "You know," Vor repeated. "We're aware of the threat classification, yes. And you are traveling with no weapons." "Correct," Zara said. Vor looked at his junior inspector, a young Peluvian named Seath who had been on the job for approximately 4 months, and who currently had the expression of someone watching a situation evolve in a direction his training had not covered. Seath offered a small, helpless movement of 2 of his 3 visible limbs that communicated, roughly, "Don't look at me." Vor pulled up the Human Transit Protocol on his secondary screen, a document he had technically read during his certification process 6 years ago, but had never needed to apply in practice, because humans were rare in this sector, and the few who passed through had always had standard weapon loadouts. Plasma sidearms, usually. Sometimes blade weapons, which the collective found charmingly archaic. Occasionally something that the scanner categorized under the deeply unhelpful label of improvised, origin unclear. He found the relevant section. He read it. He read it again. He looked up. "The Human Transit Protocol," he said carefully, "includes a provision. I assumed this was theoretical, for passengers who list their primary defensive capability as biological." "That's us," Evans said. "It specifies that biological capability cannot be scanned by standard registry equipment and must be assessed through," Vor squinted at the text, "direct interview or collective certified physical evaluation." He set the document down. "I have been working this checkpoint for 17 years. I have never once conducted a physical evaluation. First time for everything," Zara said. She sounded genuinely pleasant about it. Seath leaned toward Vor and lowered his voice to the range his species used for private communication. Unfortunately, he had not yet learned that humans had better hearing than their small, rounded ears suggested. "Senior Inspector," Seath murmured, "should we simply wave them through? They don't appear dangerous." Zara turned her head slightly toward him without making it obvious that she was turning her head. Evan didn't move at all, but something in his posture shifted in a way that Vor's security instincts registered as attention acquired, filing for later. "They are humans in a Level 3 corridor with 0 registered weapons," Vor said at normal volume, because he had decided that pretending they hadn't heard was no longer a useful strategy. "That doesn't appear dangerous to you?" Seath considered this. "I suppose I was thinking, without weapons, they are less of a threat." A pause settled over the checkpoint. It was the kind of pause that has texture. Vor, 17 years of experience in all, felt the specific discomfort of a man who has just watched a junior colleague say something out loud that cannot be unsaid. He turned to look at the 2 humans. Zara was smiling. It was not a large smile. It was the precise, compact smile of someone who has just been handed an opportunity they were not expecting but are absolutely prepared to use. "Can I ask you something?" she said to Seath, her voice carrying that pleasant, conversational quality that Vor was already beginning to associate with incoming complexity. Seath, unfortunately, said, yes. When you flag a passenger for additional screening, Zara said, what are you actually worried about? Seath blinked 3 of his 4 eyes. That they will cause harm, right? And harm requires 2 things, means and intent. She held up a hand and ticked them off. Means is how you cause harm. Intent is why. Your scanner checks for means. It reads weapons signatures, energy outputs, chemical compounds. It can't read intent. She paused. Are you with me so far? Yes, Seath said, in the tone of someone who was already regretting this. So when you see 0 weapons and think less dangerous, what you're actually doing is conflating means with capability. Those aren't the same thing. She tilted her head. Means is what you're carrying. Capability is what you can do. She let that sit for a moment. Then she raised both hands, open-palmed, directly in front of the scanner console. Scan those, she said. Vor, because he was a professional, ran the scan. The console returned its result almost immediately. Organic material, calcium composite structure, dense. Secondary tissue layer, reinforced connective fiber. Muscle density, 94th percentile, human population sample. Threat classification, inapplicable, no weapon signature detected. Zara looked at the readout. She nodded once, as if confirming something she already knew. Your scanner, she said, just told you I'm not a threat. Technically, Vor said, because he felt this conversation required at least one technically, yes. Okay. Zara lowered her hands. She turned them over once, looking at them with the casual, familiar expression of someone checking their work. Then she looked back at Vor. I broke a Dravath restraint bar on Outpost 14 during the Tessian transit incident 3 years ago. Bare hands. The bar was rated for 800 kilograms of tensile pressure. The checkpoint was very quiet. The Dravath holding the bar, she added helpfully, let go. Evan, who had been standing with his arms crossed in a posture of absolute patience, finally spoke. She's not threatening anyone, he clarified, in the tone of a man who had made this clarification before. She's answering the inspector's question. I know, Vor said. He was looking at Zara's hands with the expression of someone revising a previously held opinion at high speed. They looked like normal human hands. Somewhat scarred, perhaps. Knuckles with the specific texture of repeated impact. But objectively, they were just hands. The scanner had returned non-applicable. 17 years of security experience told Vor that the scanner was, in this particular instance, not wrong, but also somehow profoundly missing the point. You are telling me, Vor said slowly, that you do not need weapons because you are the weapon. Zara smiled again. The same compact, prepared smile. I'm telling you that your registry form has a 0 in the weapons field, she said, and that 0 is accurate. She paused. What the form doesn't have is a field for what happens if someone makes a mistake in a level 3 corridor. She said this in a tone that was not a threat. It was quieter than a threat. It was the tone of someone stating a weather condition. It may rain. Bring a coat. Here is what I am capable of in specific circumstances, not because I want you to be afraid, but because you asked, and I believe in accurate information. Vor stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked at his console. Then at Evan, who gave him a small, collegial nod that communicated she is always like this, and it is always fine, mostly. Then Vor did something he had also never done in 17 years of checkpoint duty. He stamped their transit clearance without requiring the physical evaluation. As the 2 humans collected their credentials and moved through the gate, Seath watched them go with the expression of someone performing a significant recalibration. Senior Inspector, he said quietly. Yes. Should I update the threat assessment field in the system? For humans traveling without registered weapons. Vor considered this for a moment. Yes, he said finally. Change the default flag from low risk to assessment pending. And what assessment criteria should I enter? Vor watched the 2 humans disappear into the corridor beyond the gate. Zara's hands loose at her sides, relaxed, completely ordinary-looking, rated non-applicable by every scanner on the station. Leave it blank, he said. We don't have the right categories yet. Somewhere in the Outer Rim corridor, 3 hours later, there was a brief incident involving 4 armed smugglers, a stolen cargo manifest, and a very short altercation in a service tunnel. The incident log recorded it as resolved. No weapons discharged. Under parties involved, 2 names appeared. Under injuries sustained by aggressors, the medical report used a phrase that collective trauma physicians typically reserved for industrial accidents. Under weapons used, the field read, as it always did, none. Back on Deck 9, Seath filed the incident report with the particular expression of someone whose entire professional worldview had been reorganized in a single working shift. He left the assessment field blank, as instructed. But in the personal notes section, visible only to him, he typed 4 words and saved them. Hands. Always check the hands.